Hello, it's Simon from Film Stories again, and as always, I am a boring old film nerd, and a boring old film nerd who particularly grew up with the cinema of like the 1980s and the 1990s. And this is a drum that's been banged an awful lot, but it was an era where there were the mid-budget movie, where a film didn't have to be at the very top scale of studio spending, didn't have to be like the tiny Blumhouse budget or something like that. There was a middle road where you would get the kind of films that we're just not seeing an awful lot in the cinema. For instance, there's a big rom-com with Reese Witherspoon and Will Ferrell, You're Cordially Invited.
This should be good.
That's not going to cinema. It's been picked up by Amazon MGM and it's going straight onto Amazon services, because is there a market in a cinema for a rom-com anymore? I sort of think there probably would be if you gave it a go.
Well, you can. It just takes an awful lot of work.
I keep coming back to 1993 as a really triumphant year for mid-budget cinema. At the top end, you had the Jurassic Parks, Last Action Heroes and stuff like that. But films such as, I don't know, In the Line of Fire, Sleepless in Seattle snuck through in 1993. And this is the kind of stuff, and there's loads more. Falling Down was 1993. What a movie that is.
It's an accident. It was an accident. The trigger, it's sensitive. It's okay.
All these examples of films that just didn't cost the earth. I think you'd even class something like, I don't know, Demolition Man, mid-budget by modern standards. And, you know, Demolition Man, great.
Lucky number 7.
Something interesting then has been happening at the US box office at the start of 2025, and it's just put a tiny little bit of hope back into my heart. Alan Horn, when he was heading up Warner Brothers Movies, he kind of spearheaded this. He took a look at the slate of films and thought, for the amount of time and energy we put into promoting, say, 20 films, I don't know the exact numbers, let's do 10 bigger ones, because it's going to cost us about the same to do, but we've got a bigger chance of getting a return on that. And so that's where the era of Harry Potter movies coming through.
You're a wizard, Harry.
And as a result, Warner Brothers, along with most of Hollywood, dialed back as the DVD boom ended as well, taking out a revenue stream there.
You maniacs! You blew it up!
You look at the 2019 slate for Disney, what was it, 7 films did $1 billion at the box office, and it was very concentrated, very few films, big franchises, big brands, make them big, make them all events, not room for an awful lot else. For the first couple of weeks of 2025, and as much as it's dominated at the top end by Mufasa, The Lion King, which I didn't have an awful lot of time for.
When I am king.
I mean, it had its moments, but, you know, there's Sonic the Hedgehog 3 in there. You know, my kid really likes Sonic the Hedgehog 3.
You're a colourful bunch.
Nosferatu got through, of course. Wonderful. Wicked's still around. But the first weekend of the year, you've got the stuff hanging over January the 3rd to the 5th, and you just think it's just going to be like a normal year. There's the Lion King sequel, there's the Sonic the Hedgehog sequel. Fast forward 1 year though, and something interesting happens, because along comes Gerard Butler.
I got a badge. I started a hunt.
Den of Thieves, Pantera, I think it's pronounced, or Den of Thieves 2, opened at the top spot at the US box office with $15 million. Now, January is a fairly off-peak time to release a film. There aren't many blockbusters around. All the Oscar stuff is competing, so if you can put in something that brings people away from that, you're sort of onto something there. Now, the first Den of Thieves film, I thought was really surprisingly good, considering at heart it's what you could call a homage to the Michael Mann's 1995 classic Heat.
Don't let yourself get attached to anything you are not willing to walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you feel the heat around the corner.
It's not out, Den of Thieves 2, in the UK yet, but I'm really looking forward to seeing it, because I gather the sequel 2, starring Gerard Butler, O'Shea Jackson, is also a treat.
You're not a killer. I am.
To a Disney or something like that, $15 million, it's just not a lot of money. But to the studio that opened it, Lionsgate, well, it was quite a smart little play, because the film cost $40 million to make. It picked it up as an acquisition in the US, so it didn't have to fund the film. There's a different distributor here in the UK. And here it was. It just went where everyone else sort of wasn't going. Rewarded with a $15 million opening weekend.
You feeling it?
Yeah, I'm feeling it.
Given the shortened windows now for cinema releases, there is an opportunity now to put a film in a cinema with an expectation that it will play for 3-4 weeks, raise the profile for a streaming or on-demand or premium video on demand, whatever you go with, release just a few weeks later, which is what's happened in the US with Den of Thieves 2, which is a couple of weeks after it's topped the US box office, you can now get it on premium video on demand. There is a model there that puts the mid-budget film back into cinemas. We saw this a year ago as well with The Beekeeper. I really like The Beekeeper. Jason Statham, directed by David Ayer. I mean, it's a hoot.
I'm a beekeeper. I protect the hive.
Now, Jason Statham and David Ayer have reunited on a film called Levon's Trade, written by Sylvester Stallone. It's now been renamed A Working Man, and he's getting a cinema release because, what do you know? The Beekeeper, while no one was looking, made, $150 million in cinemas around the world. Then, when you consider again its long-term intended audience, its medium-term even, was on streaming and on demand, I won't quite call it bonus money, but it's kind of something extra. There's a model there that allows us to have a mid-ish budget movie that can spike at the box office. Then we fast forward another week, and what do you know? 3 weeks running, we have January the 4th to the 26th, and the film Flight Risk tops the chart with 11.5 million.
Tell me how to fly this thing, or we will die out here.
Now, I've not seen the film Flight Risk. I'm not massively inclined to go out of my way, but Flight Risk cost $25 million to make, hides the fact that Mark Wahlberg has no hair on the poster, quite skillfully, I think. Apparently, this is the kind of stuff that people don't want to go to cinemas to see. I would contend the opposite. Now that the big blockbuster era is, it's not going away, but quite a lot of these franchises have popped a little bit. We're 2 weeks away at the point I'm recording from Captain America Brave New World, which will do reasonable money, and Marvel and Disney will happily take that money, but it doesn't at this point feel like quite the event of the old Marvel films of old. I would suggest that this is the point where an enterprising studio could take something like, what do you know, Conclave, one of the best films of last year, didn't cost a fortune to make. That's at $82 million worldwide. Hollywood, reduce your expectation of what a cinema take should be. Let's stop going for like the $1 billion, the $500,000. Be happy with like 100 million, 50 million at the box office. Treat it as the springboard for if you want to sell it on streaming, if that's how you want to approach films of this ilk. But gradually, in tiny baby steps, I think it's been slowly proven there is an appetite out there for mid-budget movies back in the cinema. I personally would like to see more of them. I'm sort of fed up of the mid-budget films that go to Netflix that I've forgotten about even while I'm watching them. I could go every 2 weeks and see something else. And I've got a whole bunch of physical media back there, and a load of it is those films that I fell in love with, just because they weren't the massive blockbusters, although there are some up there, but primarily it's not the stuff I'd suggest many others were watching. Give this broader spectrum of films a chance, give this broader spectrum of budgets a chance. Let's not have cinemas just packed with very expensive or very, very cheap. Find that middle ground again, and who knows, if you build it, we might all come along again.